Hello, you are listening to On the Topic podcast. This week, I'm a little bit misunderstood. I'm bad to the bone, but there might just be a reason behind it. I'm Dan.
And I am in the shadows. I really should have got the recognition that I deserve. I pulled the party together. I delivered for the end game. And I'm Alex. And this week, yes, we are doing Unsung Heroes and Misunderstood Villains. But before we get into all that, Dan, and really what that means, what have you been up to? Anything exciting?
Yeah, so I sold a few of my games recently, Alex. I sold a few. They were just sat there collecting dust. And I thought, well, do you know what? I could trade them in and get Guardians of the Galaxy on the Xbox. So, unfortunately, out of all those games, The Avengers was one of them because, to be honest, it was shocking. And you know what? Guardians of the Galaxy is exactly what Avengers could have been.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just so much fun.
And it was swapped out. Square Enix did both. And it's light years between the two in terms of style, gameplay, polish, storyline. You're right, Dan. Everything that game should have been is in Guardians, and the soundtrack is
just
phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
What else have I been up to? Well, it's just been my birthday, so I've had some good gifts. So I've got loads of craft beer in the fridge. But my other half bought me a book called Sellout, which I'm looking forward to reading. It is about small punk bands that have been signed up by major labels. Now, just to mention some of those bands, they include Blink-182, Jimmy Eat World,
great band,
The Donners, and My Chemical Romance. So I'm quite looking forward to diving into that. And there's some honourable mentions of some graphic novels as well. So, of course, as everyone knows, we're both big Marvel fans, but I like to read books that have lots of beautiful pictures in them. And my brother got me a Guardians of the Galaxy novel and a Thor one.
What could take?
And my other half bought me King in Black, which is about a symbiote, evil, nasty king bloke that's coming to Earth to try and take over.
Oh.
So lots to look forward to there, Alex. But what have you been up to? What's going on in your world?
Off work on holidays, but obviously family and bits and pieces. Been quite busy with my other hobby and love, which is hospital radio. So we've had some recent fundraisers, and I'm the treasurer for the charity. So I've been doing lots of work there, and stuffed my face full of sugar and mince pies. So yes, there we go. So we've been talking about this one for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been on the agenda for a while, but you know, we're here now. We're going to do it. It's been quite fun actually diving in, and in my opinion, I found Unsung Heroes harder than Misunderstood Villains.
Did you? I found it the other way around for me. I found it the other way around, and just because there's usually a supporting cast behind heroes, and actually, I think if you look not too hard enough, you can pinpoint a couple of times where perhaps the hero or heroine have been saved by their sidekicks. And if they weren't, there wouldn't be a happy ending. Whereas I found villains, you've really got to dial into their mindset and perhaps to some extent forgive what they've done to kind of understand kind of their motivations and perhaps empathize. And there's a couple, I think, that will come up that perhaps we can empathize, at least from my side. Perhaps from yours. I know we've got some listener tracks as well, haven't we, Dan?
We did, and I would probably say a couple of the Misunderstood Villains are questionable.
And this is what I'm saying though. Everything is subjective. So you may go, Hannibal Lecter, by no means should we be, saying he's a misunderstood villain. It's not his fault. He was hungry.
Yeah.
That's not going to hold up in court. So there's some things which we probably won't be agreeing with, and then there's some things which you probably get on board with just because at the end of the day they are still a villain. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. I'm really interested to get our teeth into it.
So what we're going to do, we'll split the episode into two bits. So we'll do our Unsung Heroes, and I'll do the listener.
Mm-hmm.
We only got one. Surprise! Actually, no, we did get two. but we're going to do the voice note at the end after both segments. And then we'll do misunderstood villains. And then we'll do the listener stuff there. And then we'll, of course, do the voice note from my other half, Claire, who just loves getting involved.
Sounds good to me.
So I'm going to kick things off with Unsung Heroes, Alex.
Tell me.
I'm curious to know if you've got him on your list as well. Let's head over to Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
With Samwise Gamgee.
Oh, yeah, the guy who loves bread.
Yes. I mean, ultimately, the bread could be the unsung hero because, that delicious, nourishing Nambus bread, whatever it's called.
That never-ending freaking bread that they all fantasize over as they're walking thousand upon thousand miles across New Zealand. All they talk about is that fucking bread.
It looks drier than a fucking Ryvita. I'm not going to lie. It looks horrendous, but hey. But no, my unsung hero, my first one is Samwise Gamgee.
Okay.
Now, apparently, Alex, when I was doing the research, his name actually roughly translates to half-wit. Now, you could argue that does apply to Sam, bless him. And, not to body shame, he is overweight. He's easily frightened. And, I mean, I don't agree with this per se, but apparently he's not very bright.
Oh. And this guy's a hero, apparently.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it should be obvious that Samwise is one of the protagonists because, he's not a psychic.
To be fair to him, he could have turned around many times throughout that journey, but he was there to the very end, wasn't
he? Exactly, as he sups a beer. I mean, of course, you've got Frodo. He is the ring bearer. So that huge responsibility is on him. That is the weight on Frodo's shoulders.
Literally.
But Sam's responsibility is really no less. He has to help Frodo. He supports him all the way to Mordor and has to keep him motivated while resisting the ring himself. Because obviously, if you're in close contact with this nasty, evil piece of shit that is around the neck, it's going to make you do some crazy things.
You're going to slip that bad boy on. You're going to go invisible and you're going to start doing some bad vibes, aren't you?
Yeah. So you got Frodo carrying the ring, but you've got Sam carrying Frodo. Now, he does a lot of things, Alex. He cooks for Frodo. Of course, he makes him a stew. Boil him, mash him, stick him in the stew. His potatoes.
He loves them.
Make him us.
I'm sure we've upset someone who's listening to that, what you just said there. But we're going to roll with it because that's exactly what it sounds like, to be fair, in the films.
What he says in the films.
100%.
He carries the provisions and the equipment, and he even at times watches over Frodo while he sleeps. Not in a creepy way, but because he's protecting his friend.
Well, yeah, and also, the creepy bastard, which is Smeagol, just keeps on hovering, doesn't he, around poor Frodo. And he keeps an eye open for that scrawny little bastard who wants to try and nab the ring. So he has a really important job, actually. Fair play to him.
When I was younger, I used to be able to do a really good impression of Gollum. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it anymore. I could shock the listener right now.
Shock me.
And shock you. I mean, you're on the other end of this. I'll see if I can do it.
Oh, brace yourselves.
Filthy little hobbit.
No way.
That's as good as it's going to get.
That's awesome, man. That's so good. Have you not got like a soundboard there or something? That sounds proper legit.
No, that's legit me.
Wow.
I remember watching a making of Lord of the Rings with Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
And he says it's almost like a cat coughing up a hairball. You have to sort of like close your throat up to do
it. I remember you saying that because he's saying that as he's talking, he's almost like coughing on the bad vibes, isn't he? And he's having a physical reaction to being this other being where once he was a hobbit, and obviously now he's this sad, depraved thing. And I remember actually the interview with him. Yeah, it's interesting that you've got to get yourself into that mindset, and I think you pulled it off nicely. Well done, Dan. We're learning everything new things about you, aren't we? On the episode, I love this.
We are.
Yeah.
Now back to Sam. So we'll move away from Gollum. He's nasty. There's nothing unsung or misunderstood about him. He's just a bad egg.
Yeah.
So Sam, he gave Frodo what small comfort there was to be had in Mordor. And even at the end, when death just seemed inevitable, the volcanoes erupted, lava pouring down, they're stuck on a rock. Bless Sam, he sits there, he lays there, maintaining hope when Frodo had just basically given up. Frodo's a little bitch at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%.
But let's not forget about some of the other feats that Sam made. He beat a man-eating giant spider demigod in single combat and single-handedly stormed a tower full of hostile orcs to save his friend's life.
True out.
Was the only ring bearer to steadfastly resist the temptation of the One Ring. One could argue he didn't have it long enough and literally carried another man up the side of a volcano for the fate of the world while starving and suffering from dehydration. And then when returning to the Shire, Sam had the courage to go on with his life after all of that shit that he'd gone through for him.
Shakes it off. He
shakes off and carries on. He gets married and has little hobbits himself. So bin Frodo off, give Sam a bit of appreciation, and give him the love he deserves.
Yeah, let's have a firework display back in the Shire where we can all dance around and laud the little man with the weight of the shoulders, weight on his shoulders.
But there is an honourable mention for Lord of the Rings, Alex.
Tell me.
So I've got Eowyn.
Oh, yes.
Now, she is a noble woman of Rohan who calls herself a shield maiden. Now, let's go to the final film of the trilogy, where with the Hobbit Merry, she rides into battle and kills the Witch King of Angmar, Lord of the Nazgul, in the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Now, this actually fulfills the Macbeth-like prophecy that he would not be killed by a man. So a bit of female empowerment there for our female listeners. She kicked ass.
She did.
And she took out the big nasty on that battlefield. Come at me.
There you go. It's a real justified honourable mention there.
So that's my first one, Alex. I'm intrigued to know who you've got on your list.
Let's go back, Dan, to a very popular, highly streamed episode of this podcast. Jurassic Park, 1993.
Oh, still a classic now. I'm pretty sure I saw it recently, to be honest, Alex.
I think you did. I think you sent me a picture. Was it last week?
Yeah, so good.
Specifically, though, I want to celebrate today Ray Arnold.
Oh.
Do you remember Ray?
Yes.
Samuel Jackson.
Sammy Jackson.
So, without Ray, Dan, everyone would be brown bread. They would be picked out of the teeth, the jaws of many a dinosaur. Let me explain. So, let me recap the path for unsung hero who'd eventually meet his demise. So, Dennis Nedry. Now, fucking arsehole Dennis Nedry is out to steal the magic of the yet-to-be-opened Jurassic Park from, of course, our hapless owner and overseer of one of the most ill-advised activities in human history. He does conduct some clever and ultimately lethal bit of corporate espionage, which, of course, will see his end as well as our faithful heroes. Now, in order to do so, he programs to shut down power to certain parts of the park, doesn't he, Dan?
Yeah.
There is a tornado that's coming, and he thinks, well, actually, I'm going to use that as a guise. And in the cover of night and darkness, I'm going to shut off the power and do a runner, which allows him to sneak out. Now, he had hoped with the genetic material needed for rival companies. Of course, he ultimately left the island, or he would leave the island and its employees to the mercy of God's fearful creatures. Doesn't happen, though. Now, upon finding out Ned's nefarious plan, the site's lead engineer, Samuel Jackson's Ray Arnold, who's chomping on a cigarette, was called upon to save the day at about the 2/3 mark of the film. So shit has gone to fan, and the power's down, and Sam Neill and the kids are out in the wilderness being chased by a T-Rex and the rest of it. And he's been tasked with trying to uncover exactly what Ned's been up to. Now, he would, of course, eventually give his life for his colleagues and the site visitors. And as we ascertained in that episode from, was it last year? Year before?
Yeah. 2018, I think, wasn't it?
Oh, not even that. Oh, longer than.
Yeah.
We did behind the scenes. It feels like yesterday, Dan. Well, in that episode, of course, we know the background of that story. We talk about, the real world events and the rest of it. But in order to resolve Ned's work, Arnold ventures out from the state of the compound to the nearby maintenance shed to perform a system-wide reboot. He can't do it remotely. He's got to go to the power shed and reboot everything there. But once he does that, everything should be tickety-boo. Power should be back to the compounds and to the cages, and everything should be right in the world. That's whilst everyone else in the control room, or they're being taken to security bunkers. Now, after not hearing from him in some time, Dr. Ellie Sadler and Muldoon go searching for the chief engineer, but after encountering some clever girls outside, only Ellie makes it to the building, whilst the Raptors, of course, trap and kill Muldoon. Now, in the shed, what does Sadler find?
Oh, the grisly remains, the arm of
Indeed
poor Arnold.
The severed arm. Now, sadly, the Raptors had killed Ray inside the shed and literally tore him apart. However, I would argue, Dan, I put forth that without the bravery of Sam Jackson's character, we would actually never restore power to the island. Dinosaur would never have been contained to some extent, and we would never have experienced a plight of hundreds, or we would never actually experience a plight of hundreds, if not thousands of other visitors and daredevils to the subsequent islands in later films. So if Sam Jackson's character done actually what he was supposed to, or didn't do what he was supposed to, shall I say, we've never had sequels, and no one would be none the wiser about Isla Nublar. But as it happened, he did a good job and saved a lot of lives. Now, John Arnold's gruesome death by velociraptors was actually intended to be shown on screen. Now, we talk about this on the behind the scenes, don't we, Dan?
Yes.
Unfortunately, the real-life hurricane, Iniki, tore into Hawaii during production, destroyed a lot of the park sets, which, of course, is an eerie example of life imitating film's art. Now, regrettably, this meant that Sam Jackson was unable to complete his filming his death scene, and it changed so Ellie finds a dismembered arm instead, which I think is still quite a scary moment, because I think she backs into the wall, doesn't she? And she gets a reassuring hand, and she knows it's him. She turns around, and of course, there's just an arm.
Yeah.
But my point is, Dan, without Arnold making the heroic sacrifice that he actually intended to do, or did end up doing, we'd be in a much sadder position than we are today. We wouldn't have 4 or 5 extra films. So for me, the true saviour of Jurassic Park is going to be Ray.
That's bold. That's a good one as well. Never would have thought to have picked someone like Ray Arnold.
Because, Ray he had to unpick the dastardly plan of Ned's coding, right? That's not easy to do. What's he say?
You didn't say the magic word.
Please! God damn it! I hate this hacker crap.
You didn't say the magic word.
He didn't say the magic word. So, he becomes frustrated. He works it out. He ultimately is there to save the day, but gives the ultimate sacrifice in order to make sure that everyone gets off the islands. But as we ascertain in the behind the scenes, the kill count isn't very high. It's something like 20 or 25 people, isn't it? There's not that many people actually left on the island, because they all get airlifted or evacuated off because of the storm. But nonetheless, he saved still 6 or 7 people. And that should be commended, Dan.
Agreed.
So that's my first up, Jurassic Park. Straight out the gates.
Beautiful. Well, I've got a second one and another honourable mention.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for my second one, let's head to a galaxy far, far away. Let's head over to the Star Wars franchise now. The Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
Now, while our heroes, such as Obi-Wan, Luke, Ray. Well, undoubtedly some of, our more important characters of the saga. They wouldn't have survived throughout their films without some help.
True.
Fortunately, they had the assistance of an astromech droid by the name of R2-D2.
Ooh.
He never utters a single line throughout the 9 films. He just beep bops and do bops.
This is true. Yeah, binary.
But he took part in some of the most important battles in the galaxy, and he got his friends out of some dire situations.
Indeed.
And I think it's fair to say, this little astromech droid is fiercely loyal to his friends. He's always by their side. Or if he's not, he's usually putting them out of trouble.
Or zapping the baddies.
Exactly. While he almost always had an attitude, he wasn't afraid to speak his mind, per se, in his beep bop do bop voice. R2-D2 had a strong sense of right and wrong. He always knew that he needed to keep his friends safe, and he never stopped at nothing to achieve that goal. He was fearless. As you say, he was going and zapping people with his little taser and such. Now, here's some of his mentionable or honourable moments. He helps Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan and Padme and Anakin escape a Trade Federation blockade.
True.
R2 also saved Padme from having molten metal poured on her in the droid factory of Geonosis in Attack of the Clones.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
He saves Luke, Leia and Han in the compactor in A New Hope.
I was going to mention that one, he does, yes.
Yeah. While he is best known for last-minute rescues, he also has a master of safeguarding information. He'll keep hold of that information until he gets to the person he needs to give it to. The droid, actually, before I start going to that, that's some good GDPR stuff from R2 there.
Oh, 100%. He's fully compliant with European regulations. That's what you're looking for in droids, isn't it, Dan? Really?
Yeah, we need more droids like that in our lives.
We do.
So R2, who was given crucial plans to destroy the Death Star, throughout the film, no member of the Empire could extract these plans, even when he was on the Death Star itself. So, stealthy little sod is going for the Death Star. Well, I've got the plans to destroy you. Come at me. No one could. No one even found him.
Nope.
So he fixes the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon. And he was crucial in the rescue of Han Solo, where he infiltrates Jabba the sail barge and hiding Luke's lightsaber.
Oh, of course, yes. Doesn't he eject the lightsaber, flings it into the air, and Luke captures it? Is that right?
Yes.
I want to say he does.
So he sort of like flips off the diving board, doesn't he? And grabs the lightsaber. Yeah. In The Force Awakens, he held the missing piece of the map that revealed Luke Skywalker's location. And in The Last Jedi, he also used Leia's old hologram to try and coax Luke out of hiding, which, of course, we know worked.
Yes.
Now, even George Lucas believes that R2 is an unsung hero. Now, apparently, during an interview with Rolling Stone, he explained how R2 was the true hero of the series in terms of his actions. And he said this: whenever there's a pivotal moment of real danger, he's the one that gets everybody out of it. I think it's fair to say he does.
He does. But what I would say is you've got to take George Lucas with a pinch of salt, because look what he did with all the films. Who does those? The first films, the 1 to 3, and then remasters to buggery the original trilogy and change their lives. That guy needs a word. But yeah, he can have a view because he created it. But really, that guy is a bit of an arsehole.
That's fair. That's fair.
100%.
R2's not the main protagonist of Star Wars, and he never will be. But he's the only one that, for me, consistently, the beer's going to my head, Alex. Jesus,
it is. It's kicking in.
displayed the actions that make a hero. R2D2 always protected his friends. And for me, that made him the true hero of Star Wars.
I've got to politely disagree, but we'll find out in a couple of moments.
Okay. But one honourable mention, but it's not Star Wars related. It goes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's talk about the Rat. Avengers Endgame from San Francisco. This little vermin walks onto the controls. He accidentally pushes some buttons that opens up the quantum tunnel, and of course, Ant-Man escapes the quantum realm. So
spits out Paul Rudd, doesn't he?
Without that action and Paul Rudd coming out, they would never have learned about time travel in the quantum realm, and Endgame would never have happened. The end.
See you later.
See you later.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued to hear what your second one is, because I feel like you're going to put me to shame with my R2.
I don't think so. I mean, R2D2 is a phenomenal friend and confidant, as we find out, and supporter of the Rebel Alliance. But I would argue, Dan, that a Wookiee male warrior, smuggler, mechanic, pilot, resistant fighter who fought in the Clone Wars, the Galactic Civil War, and the Cold War, and subsequent First Order Resistance War, coming from the planet Kashyyyk and becoming a military leader, Chewie or Chewbacca, is in fact the real unsung hero of Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've already reeled off far more than R2D2 ever has able to do. You know, this guy is a celebrated, well-recognised hero. He's got medals. I don't see R2D2 having too many of those. But what I'll say is he's often seen as the backdrop comic relief, isn't he, to Harrison Ford's lovable rogue Han Solo. Now, using Han as a go between the characters and the audience, of course, we don't really know what the Wookiee says, but we get one side of the conversation with, of course, Han often being chastised by his very friend. And you see them of always bickering and arguing in the starship about how to fly the Falcon and what to do. But then, Dan, why is Chewie the real savior of Star Wars? Well, I'm glad you asked, because, well, without Chewie convincing Han to join the fight for the rebellion and to lend their ship to the final battle for the galaxy in the first film, A New Hope, the Millennium Falcon never returns to the Battle of the Death Star, which is seen as a turning point of the battle, and supporting the small group of X-Wings in the trench runs. They'd all get shot to shit. They'd never survive with all of those turrets, and they'd be blown to smithereens. Had the Falcon not been there, Yavin 4 is destroyed, which of course housed the final stand and secret rebellion base, and the war is over. Roll credits, and plenty of missed merchandise for over 40 years subsequently. It doesn't happen though. Chewie convinces his best pal to go back into the fray to lend their ship and to help out the rebels at the final hour. And as we know, 35 plus years later, we still have a franchise that's going well and strong. Chewie or Chewbacca, the unsung hero, literally because no one can understand what he's saying, is the hero, Dan. I don't think there should be any qualms or question about that. Droids or no droids, yes, it could have ended a lot sooner. But really, when it came to it, Han needed some convincing, and Chewie was there safe day.
That's a good shout.
I rest my case.
That is a very good shout. Have you got any more, Alex? Any more unsung heroes?
Not heroes, Dan. I've got a couple of villains, but no heroes. I think I've got two solid ones there for me.
Yeah, very good. Over to the listener now for this one.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got my namesake, Dan. Now he says Rocket Raccoon.
Oh, okay.
Helped Thor make Stormbreaker.
True.
Lost everyone he cared about in Infinity War, and Mission in Asgard would have failed without him.
Ah, yes.
Rocket was the biggest hero of Endgame.
This is true. He helps Thor to keep it together to get the what is it? Is it the Power Stone?
It's the
red floaty one, isn't it?
Yeah, the red one. I've forgotten which one it is, Alex.
That one, though.
It's not the Mind Stone. It's the Reality Stone.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
I had to think there. But no, that's a fair shout because he loses Peter Quill. He loses Drax. He loses Gamora. He loses Groot, who's ultimately his best friend.
Yeah. Keeps it together.
Keeps it together. He teams up with Nebula, who was essentially a villain for 2 films.
Mm.
And yeah, no, I could totally get on side with that. I could definitely get on side with that because
good shout.
Thor was also on the brink of not doing that mission in Asgard in 2013, and Rocket helped him keep it together. That is a good shout.
Yeah, I like it.
That is a good shout, Dan. Thank you very much. So on to misunderstood villains. And my first one, I've got 3.
Okay.
So I've got 3. My first one is Cruella de Vil.
Oh, okay. From Dalmatians.
Yes. So I think it might be worth mentioning, Alex. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the story of Cruella on Disney Plus. If people have got Disney Plus, it's worth checking out. Have
I haven't
you
seen it? No, Emma Stone, isn't it?
It's really good. So before I go into it, maybe we should put in the spoiler klaxon. As I say, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that film. So let's dust it off. Here it is.
Beautiful.
So let's talk about Cruella, or originally known as Estella Miller. Now, Estella is a creative child with a talent for fashion and she has a nefarious streak. Estella's mother, Catherine, decides to pull her from school to keep her record clean and move to London. So on the way there, her mum stops at an upper-class party to ask for financial assistance. Despite being told to stay in the car, Estella decides she's going to sneak into the party and unintentionally attracts the attention of the host's 3 ferocious Dalmatians. So you can see where this is going. They chase her outside and push Catherine off a cliffside balcony to her death.
Wowzers.
So almost instantly at this party, she becomes orphaned, and off she goes, blaming herself for Catherine's death. She runs away to London and befriends street urchins Jasper and Horace, who take her in and look after her. 10 years later, Estella practices thievery with her friends, honing her fashion skills by designing their disguises. Now, for her birthday, Jasper and Horace get her an entry-level job at the Liberty department store. It's very nice. Lovely big store. However, Estella is made a janitor, so poor lass, she's having to clean the bogs, and is denied the chance to use her talents. So when Estella drunkenly, she gets very drunk in this scene, she goes into the store and redecorates a window display where the Baroness von Hellman, a renowned but authoritarian haute couture designer, is actually impressed by her work and offers her a coveted job at the Baroness's fashion house. Now, Estella eagerly accepts and gains the Baroness's confidence. Although proud that her designs are put on display, she eventually notices her boss wearing a necklace that once belonged to Catherine.
Oh.
Uh-oh, indeed. When the Baroness claims that an employee had previously stolen it, Estella asks her accomplices, Jasper and Horace, to help her retrieve the necklace. It's almost like an heirloom, isn't it?
It is.
You want that back. And they decide they're going to raid the Baroness's upcoming black and white ball. To conceal her identity at the ball, Estella creates an alter ego for herself. And of course, this is how Cruella's born. And wears one of the Baroness's old designs purchased from a vintage clothing store. And she buys it from the store owner called Artie. Cruella steals the spotlight at the ball, buying Jasper and Horace enough time to break into the Baroness's high security vault, only to realise that the Baroness is already wearing it. Now, Jasper, straying from the original plan, disguises himself as a waiter and releases rats into the party. And as panic ensues, Estella manages to swipe the necklace. Now, noticing the necklace has been stolen, the Baroness summons her Dalmatians with a dog whistle, causing Estella to realise that the Baroness is ultimately responsible for Catherine's death. Now, I won't spoil the rest of the film for our listeners. Of course, we have put the warning klaxon in there. But you can understand why Estella or Cruella is probably a little bit misunderstood. Maybe why she doesn't like Dalmatians. And perhaps, she's done a good thing getting her revenge. I don't know. You could possibly argue that point.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, I guess that's the purpose of the film, is to show actually that there are some motivations behind her actions, perhaps before we see her much later in life in 101 Dalmatians. And, seeing her mother fall to her death and obviously, the whole goings on with this heirloom would perhaps change someone's outlook on life. So you could perhaps understand where she's coming from, maybe.
Yeah. So it's a good film to watch. If you got Disney Plus, definitely go and check it out. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
So get on board and maybe give us your thoughts on where you stand with Cruella or Estella.
Let's go and give it a watch.
Yeah, do it. And so I think you and the wife would probably enjoy it. I genuinely do. And I'll eat my hat if you don't.
What hat have you got on?
I haven't got one on at the moment, Alex. I do need a haircut, though. My hair's got more volume than the pensioner's telly.
Oh, wow. We'll need to go and get it sorted out before we get locked down now.
I've got my haircut on, well, at the time of recording, it'll be Christmas Eve. But at the time this episode drops, then hopefully it would have been chopped off by then.
Hopefully.
If not, I'll have to wait until the missus comes home and we can shave it off.
Go baldy.
Go baldy, indeed. So that's my first one for Misunderstood Villains.
Very good.
What's your one? What's your first choice?
From a much loved series of ours, we, on the odd occasion, return back to it again. This one is from Harry Potter. And it's Severus Snape now.
I've got him on my list.
Okay.
So this is a good talking point for us both.
Well, let's dive in and you can perhaps bounce off as a way you see fit. But the Harry Potter saga, Dan, is really told from the perspective of a rather oblivious child. And the readers spent most of the series wondering whether or not Snape is good or bad. With of course, the effect that even the readers didn't really get him till the final book of the series lands. Now, why is he unsung? Well, in my argument, I put forth, he literally protects Harry every year at Hogwarts. It's not an easy thing to do, given that the hapless fuckwit keeps on putting himself in harm's way of dangerous killer spells and Death Eaters and trolls. It's quite a difficult task to do whilst keeping your own double dealings at bay. And he only ever does this out of love for Harry's mother, Lily, and gets an awful lot of shit back from Harry Potter. A lot of snark. So, a bit of a recap for those who don't actually know who we're talking about. Well, Snape's story is one of the most heartbreaking you'll ever listen to. Born to a troubled household, his only solace is Lily, his childhood friend. Becoming students at Hogwarts, they're sorted into separate houses, which isn't good. And Snape becomes a pariah at school and is bullied by other students. Now later, his friend Lily ends up marrying Snape's bully, which of course ends up being Harry's dad. It's an interesting twist on the Half-Blood Prince in the story.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good insight into Snape's background. And his heartbreak leads him down a dark path. Of course, that will eventually lead to Lily's death and a ravaged wizarding world. Now, Snape is forced to return to the man who killed the love of his life and pledge his allegiance to him. And that can't be easy to do. And this double life results in Snape's total alienation, I guess, from all his loved ones, his friends, but also his colleagues at school. And Snape is then forced, that wasn't bad enough, to kill Dumbledore, which is one of the worst things you've ever seen on screen. He's
Harrowing.
only yeah, he is. And he's his only confidant. The only one actually knows him and what he's about, and he actually tells him to, as we find out. Now, completely alone and cut off from his allies, Snape is killed by Lily's murderer, and he dies in a boat shed, which is not a way to go, staring into the eyes of the woman he loves in the face of his childhood tormentor. He's utterly alone in the world in his final moments. But again, I put forward that he really is misunderstood. I mean, he literally is in the pages, and we get that from J.K. Rowling's, final chapters of the final book. But because the story is told from Harry's eyes, you get just a one-sided perspective. But of course, we learn he's saved at every twist and turn. He's there through Harry's life. He's growing up as a young adult. He saves him many a time. He intervenes in a positive way from the Dark Lord himself when he wants to wage war against Hogwarts. He protects the young boy. Now, of course, at the very end, he dies, and Harry is there at the very end. But he's always there protecting Harry. And of course, as we ever see him, he's always finding himself with the alliance of the Death Eaters and the rest of the dark forces in the Wizarding world. And it might be a bit of an obvious one, but I still think it's Alan Rickman who plays Severus Snape. We've talked about Rickman before, just being a phenomenal actor. And I think he portrays on screen now, and there's nothing taken away from the book, and I reference both when I talk in Disguise. The book is, of course, all the books are very, very good. Rickman does a phenomenal job, in my opinion, of on screen and brings it literally to life. But either way, you can kind of see how he's kind of taken on this burden of looking after this young boy. And that's not an easy thing to do when he's got to navigate all of the treachery and the danger with the Death Eaters. So I think this guy needs a big round of applause and lots of fireworks in celebration of his contributions to the Wizarding world, because he really is an unsung hero.
Yeah, I totally agree. Whether you read the books or if you watch the films, for years, literally years, we were made to hate Snape mercilessly.
Yeah.
We believed that had Snape not existed in Harry's life, Harry would probably have less troubles. He was the permanent villain in our minds until the moment he gets killed by Nagini.
Indeed.
Which is quite a horrible moment. I know you sort of see it from the outside, but it's hearing the thuds as the snake hits him. Or
doesn't he get his throat bitten off or something? Is that right?
Yeah.
I want to say he does.
It's pretty grim.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's not a nice moment. But our love for Snape only really sort of surfaces after his sacrifices his life. This is when we realised how he had protected Harry like a guardian and how he kept an eye on Harry just so he could, stay safe. I mean, I've got a question for you, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So when Snape obviously carks it, did you feel guilty that after all those years of hating him, when the truth was revealed?
100%. I think I even recall perhaps having a solitary tear in my eye. Because it is quite a sad moment, because, of course, they do share some intimacy, I think, in Snape's dying moments, isn't he? Harry uses his wand to pull out some memories of Snape's childhood with Lily, and it really is quite heartfelt and sad, and I think quite tragic. And you're right, I think there is a sense of guilt because we've been gunning for this guy's death, for good nearly a decade at that point, weren't we? Only for him to learn that actually he fiercely loved Lily Potter. And even after her death, of course, protected her offspring. So, yeah, I think an immense sense of guilt and odd sadness as that character passes.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Lily. He never stops loving her. Like even even like she's passed, and if it wasn't for her, he probably wouldn't have been ready to risk everything every year.
Year in, year out, he's there conjuring counter spells and stalking the halls, overlooking Harry, not because he wants to get him in trouble, but of course he wants to save him. He has been tasked by Dumbledore to be his guide. And of course the pact that he later has with Malfoy, of course, throws that all into disarray.
Yeah. I've put in my notes, actually. Harry actually doubts him until the very end. Harry had misunderstood Snape for all of these years, and how wrong he had been about the man who'd actually looked over him as a guardian. Funnily enough, I've actually got an honourable mention for Harry Potter.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I forgot about this one in my notes.
Tell me,
Draco Malfoy.
Huh?
He was Draco Malfoy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how's this?
So he was actually raised to believe awful things, and he slowly transformed from a schoolyard bully into a seriously cruel teen. However, he never had it in him to truly hate. He doesn't go out to, he could have killed Dumbledore himself as part of the pact,
True.
But Snape does it for him. Again, we're going back to the misunderstood villain thing. However, he never had that hate in him. If he genuinely hated non-pure bloods and non-human magical creatures, Draco would have had no problem being a Death Eater. He was undoubtedly an arsehole.
True that.
Who loved feeling superior, but he was also a kid who wasn't prepared for the realities of evil. He was only following in his father's footsteps, but as the series went on, you just get the feeling that, maybe he was doing so because he feared for his mother's life.
Oh, we do get a sense of that in the final film, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fair one.
So, yeah, just an honourable mention there.
Good shout.
So, my last one for misunderstood villains is Loki. And I'm kind of expecting you to chime in, given that we're both MCU fans. And of course, we've watched Loki over 10, 11 years and plus the series this year. You could argue his redemption arc wouldn't work if he wasn't an antagonist. His good actions have only been out of necessity. His attempts to be closer to his family were misconstrued as mischievous. Odin doesn't treat him very well. I think that's a given from the first film.
Yes, yeah.
It was the same with Thor, as the family considered Loki to be mischievous and a lost cause. The truth is that Loki actually tried to be close to them the entire time. Loki is an able person in his own right, yet Odin and Thor saw his mastery with things like spells, as Loki engaging in magic tricks. Now, of course, he's learning this from his mother, Frigga. He attempted to provide advice to them, but was told to know his place by both Thor and Odin.
Is it true?
It was only after Loki realised they kept misjudging him and that he embraced their perception of him and becoming the god of mischief. And of course, bless him, he was always overlooked in favour of Thor. Now, Loki tells Thor that he never wanted to be the king, but was tired of not being treated like his equal. So, perhaps he wasn't looking to be a ruler. He just wanted to be looked at as an equal. The truth is that the Asgardians placed too much attention towards Thor to realise Loki's potential. Now, you could also argue that Loki is an incredible warrior himself, and he's aided Thor in many battles whilst possessing the skills for strategy and tactics. None of his accomplishments were ever celebrated, making it understandable why Loki's frustrations eventually tipped to their boiling point. Now, he never hates Thor. I think they just have that brotherly moment where you get into a bit of a scrap. Loki's acts of letting the frost giants into Asgard never involved getting Thor banished, as he only wanted Odin to see that Thor wasn't ready to be king. And of course, in Avengers Infinity War, Loki could have been chosen to escape with the Tesseract, but he stayed on board to his doom because he didn't want to leave Thor to die.
He did. This is true.
His true desire was to gain Odin's approval. Now, here's the theory. It's Loki. It's believed that Loki had planned on killing the frost giants in Jotunheim due to a mad bid for revenge against them. However, his real plan was to prove himself to Odin that he was worthy, although he had the wrong idea of what would impress his father. It was only after he was rejected by Odin that Loki fell into space and was corrupted by Thanos, meaning Loki wouldn't have been interested in any of the villainous things he did in the Avengers had Odin understood the place Loki was coming from.
Wow. Deep. I've read another perspective that bolts onto that to say, well, Odin was quite a ineffective ruler. He let things drift and all of the other realms were starting to become a little bit twitchy, and they were growing in power. He was taking his eye off the ball, I think it's fair to say, Odin, resting on his laurels. And you're right. I think you're right to say Thor was seen as the favoured child, the one for the throne, and of course Loki. I mean, he was a tactician, as you say. He was very clear in thought and knew what he was doing. And seeing his father be quite ineffective, and his brother, who was next to the throne, being bloodthirsty and impatient, he saw it as his right to be able to look after his people. But of course, as we know, the events of the first film and subsequent had other ideas, but there is an argument that actually he was probably the most fit out of the three of them to actually lead the Asgardians, because he had probably a better approach to a reign than either of those did. And to be fair, he did to some extent in was it 3?
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, wasn't it? Where he was pretending to be Odin.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because I think it's the end of Thor 2 where you see him on the throne as Odin, but
yes,
it's Ragnarok where you truly see him reveal himself.
So he does kind of have an effective reign, and comes to fruition really what he was destined probably to do. But yeah, there's that theory that actually he was probably the most better suited, and the others just didn't see it, and that's quite rightly why he kicked off and played up. And I think that's probably fair, Dan. I'd play up if I was in this situation.
I mean, we've seen his redemption arc twice now. So first, sort of throughout the films, then he's had to do it again quickly in the series of where he's a variant, should we say?
Yes.
So I do believe that there is some good in our God of Mischief, and that perhaps he was just a little bit misunderstood. So that is why I've chosen our favourite God of Mischief.
Good choice. Well, let's start with the MCU then, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, he's taken a more literal direction in terms of saving the world, and for that reason, he had to be stopped. But I'm going to put forward the argument that Ultron, the murderous robot, is actually a misunderstood villain.
Oh, I genuinely thought you were going to go with Thanos then, but no. I'm now intrigued to see why Ultron is going to be a misunderstood villain.
Let me tell you. So the Avengers Age of Ultron, well, that's the MCU version. We'll come to that in a second. But who or what is Ultron? Well, initially he made his debut as an unnamed character in the Avengers number 54 back in 1968, with his first full appearance in Avengers 55 in August that year. Now, he is a self-aware and a highly intelligent robot who, unfortunately, Dan, as they always do, develops a god complex and a grudge, in the comics at least, against his creator, Hank Pym. With the original Ant-Man, with a goal to destroy humanity that brought him into repeated conflict with the Avengers. Every couple of years, he's reimagined or reborn, and he actually still is a formidable foe in the comics.
He is.
But the version I'm talking about, though, is the MCU specifically, so the films and a film from The Age of Ultron. Now, we see our heroes at the end of their campaign at the very beginning of the film against the final pockets of Hydra, don't we? They're going through the forests of Sokovia, isn't it? And they're fighting the pockets of Hydra. Now, seeing that the Avengers can actually bring peace to the world, but they don't always or will not always be there, Tony, of course, devises a program using his AI Jarvis, which can maintain world peace. They're using the Mind Stone, which is probably one of the biggest missteps in modern movie history. And what it leads to is, of course, a murderous but ultimately misunderstood villain, or to some, I think, a scapegoat. So, the argument is that Tony Stark created Ultron to bring peace to the world. Well, his program Ultron actually did find a way to do it. Sadly, it's a more literal and more murderous way to do that than what actually he was created for. Now, born out of the Mind Stone, actually the Mind Stone knew the path of which humanity and the Avengers were going, and the power of the Infinity Stones would eventually lead Earth and our heroes eventually to Endgame and Thanos. So his motives were clearly established and explained. He saw the Earth was weak, and the only way to save mankind from Thanos was to evolve. And so to do so, we'd have to kill the Avengers, because the Avengers kept on saving everyone instead of allowing only the weak to die and the strong to survive. Ultron knew Thanos was coming, and he wanted to prepare the planet to defend itself when it needed to. So, I argue, Dan, ultimately it was truly Tony Stark who was the villain of the movie, while Ultron was only trying to do and be the hero that Tony wanted.
That's a good shout.
Ergo, actually, he's not a bad egg. He's just misunderstood.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
Now, if we just forget all of the murder in Sokovia and the murder in Africa and the dropping of a city onto planet Earth, look all past that. Actually, he was only going to do what Tony Stark told him to.
That is a good choice.
But you do have to overlook an awful lot of murder and killing. I mean, the alternative is, and the easy one that I thought you were going to say, we should make probably an honourable mention on the fly here if you weren't already, is probably Thanos. And we talked about it before, down in terms of him being misunderstood, because he does have that. It's an established theory, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, you are if you're Bill Gates, if some believe their conspiracy theories and COVID, but we don't spread that shit here. But I talk about tongue in cheek. But there is the established theory that people do believe that the world does need thinning out, or the projection of growth will far exceed our ability to be able to stay on planet Earth. Therefore, Thanos believes that we should have a bit of a thinning out and restore balance, because the whole of the galaxy is getting too big for his shoes. But again, you've got to overlook an awful lot of death, genocide, and killing to get to that point, I guess. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned Thanos. Two of our listeners mentioned Thanos as their favourite misunderstood villain.
Really?
So first up, we've got Gemma. She says, Thanos, in theory, an overpopulated world is bad for the environment.
It's true.
Although apparently scientists have proven that is incorrect. But that's not me. I'm not casting shade. I'm not casting shade. That's just something I've read. But then, given, how some of these scientists come up with things and they do sort of conflict each other, then, I'm more inclined to agree with Gemma.
What do they know?
What do they know? I'm a scientist in my own right. Not one of those that spreads ridiculous theories, though, on Twitter. I don't do that. No. And then we've got Chris. He says, Thanos is very misunderstood and totally relatable. I mean, wouldn't you love to click your fingers and loads of bell ends disappear? I mean, if we're just wiping out dickheads across the planet, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Oh, 100%. But unfortunately, I think that's the way it goes. I don't think it cherry picks people, does it? Just takes 50% out. Isn't that how it worked?
Yeah, I mean, it took out several of our heroes. So
took out Hawkeye's whole family. That's a bad 50% if you lose your whole family, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So 2 of our listeners chose Thanos, but my namesake again got involved.
Oh yeah,
he's chosen someone different. So let's head over to Disney again. He chose Captain Hook. Sorry, I'm just pushing my cat off the laptop there. He's a nutter. He's on a rampage. He's hungry. So he chose Captain Hook, and he says, "Little shit cuts his hand off and feeds it to a crocodile, and is still treated like a bad guy. All he wanted was justice." Would you agree with that?
It's fair.
I'd want a bit of revenge.
Yeah, I have heard that theory actually, and actually he isn't the bad guy, and actually he's bullied and set upon by these unruly children. And you would be upset if your limb gets lopped off. You're going to be chasing someone down with a hook and an army of pirates behind you. At least I would.
Yeah, definitely.
It's fair.
So I could get on board with that. Captain Hook was bullied, and that's why he's sick of Peter Pan shit. We did get a voice note as well, Alex, from my other half, Claire. So let's split this into, because she sent 2, I believe.
Yes.
So let's listen to the first one. So she chose a couple from Emperor's New Groove, her favourite Disney film. So let's listen to that now.
My favourite film is Emperor's New Groove. Dan will tell you I have made him watch it like probably hundreds of times. And I have a misunderstood villain and an unsung hero from that film. So misunderstood villain, I think, is Yzma. Let's face it, the Emperor was a bit of a dick. Like, he wanted to wipe out an entire village to put his holiday home there. So he was a bit of a dick. And Yzma just wants a bit of recognition. She's been working for him for years and he doesn't care, and then he just fires her. So no wonder why she was a villain. So I think that she's a little bit misunderstood. And I also think Kronk is a bit of an unsung hero because he doesn't have it in him to kill the Emperor when he's turned into a llama. So he does rescue him, and at the end he comes good because he tries to kill Yzma, but they all just think he's a big dumb guy, when in reality he's just really nice, and he's just, okay, yeah, he is a little bit dumb, but he's just a nice guy in the end. So I think he is also a bit of an unsung hero.
I've seen this film several times because she literally loves it. And you know, I'm inclined to agree. You know, Yzma is again mistreated by the Emperor, and you know, she just wants to, you know, be involved. She wants to do her bit, but actually, I think she just goes around the wrong way of getting it done.
Yeah.
And poor Kronk, you know, he's just the budding sidekick to Yzma. But you know, actually, he's not that bad. He's just doing her bidding.
Fair perspectives.
Well, let's head over to the MCU now. This was her second choice.
I also have a misunderstood villain from Marvel. So I think a misunderstood villain is Killmonger from Black Panther, because his cousins and stuff just got to like live their life in Wakanda, and he got left behind after his dad was killed. So no wonder he's a little bit angry, and I think he does deserve the recognition that he wants, because he should have been there with them, but he's not because he got left behind. So I think he's a bit of a misunderstood villain as well.
So Alex, would you agree with that? Would you agree that Killmonger is misunderstood?
No.
No? Do you think he's just a bad egg?
I think so. I mean, you can say that he was hard done by, and you can say that you know, the Wakandas did the dirty and they didn't do enough, and they've conveniently forgotten, and all those things are correct. But he's still a mercenary and still killed an awful lot of people, and the way in which he finds himself then back into Wakanda is his hands are well and truly dripping in blood. His ledger is red. Had he fought in the more traditional way of his right to the throne, then perhaps you could understand it. But he's done an awful lot of killing and bad shit to get to that point. I don't think it excuses what he does as we lead up to the battle for the throne. Everything after that, then maybe, I can understand, but I don't think it excuses what he does before. I understand the perspective, but on this one, I'm not quite sure he's squeaky clean leading up to it.
Well, again, if you head over to Marvel's What If on Disney Plus, and even in that animated series, he's no angel. Even towards the end, when he's fighting for the Infinity Stones, he is
still going to screw you over.
Still going to screw you over, yeah. So I don't trust him. I don't trust him. But then, multiverse. There could be a multiverse somewhere where he's a good egg, and he could rule Wakanda.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory, and a lot of this is to do with the fact of these characters have had something done to them. It's not their fault, and they've been nudged onto that direction and destiny. And I do get that with Killmonger, because it wasn't his fault about his father, and he was forgotten, but he still made decisions that led to that point. And there were some pretty bloody ones.
I wouldn't be surprised that, with Black Panther 2 out next year, that somehow they could bring him back as a good egg.
I really hope so. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't be a surprise to people. So if I'm not going to put the klaxon in here. But if you haven't seen Black Panther, you should do, because there's a good reason why it's won awards. But he does croak at the very end. It is quite a touching moment when they're looking over Wakanda. But I reckon, what with this multiverse malarkey, I think there's a real possibility, and sadly with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, there is an opportunity to not reinvent and to replace Chadwick, but actually to bring back Killmonger what's his name? Jordan.
Oh,
what's that?
Michael B. Jordan.
Michael B. Jordan. That's it. To bring him back, because he was very, very good, and he definitely had a chemistry. I mean, he's a great actor anyway.
Yeah, but, fantastic.
I do suspect, because they say that I know going somewhat off topic here, but they said that the What If series is canon.
Yeah,
and so I think we'll end up seeing versions and iterations of the bad Doctor Strange, and I think we will perhaps see a version of Killmonger, and I hope it works its way back into Panther 2.
Yeah, talking of Doctor Strange quickly, Alex, I know we're sort of off topic here again. Have you seen the trailer?
I haven't, and the reason being is I didn't know whether it led directly from Spider-Man.
I did watch it. For me, it doesn't really spoil anything from Spider-Man, which is good.
It's a teaser trailer, isn't it? It's not the full.
Yeah, so it doesn't really sort of show you anything that it obviously takes place after, but it doesn't spoil anything, which is good.
Okay.
But you mentioned the bad Doctor Strange. I won't spoil the trailer for you too much, but it's worth watching. It is
canon, and
it is canon, and it's there.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, so that wraps it up for our unsung heroes and misunderstood villains.
It's not their fault.
No,
it's not their fault, Dan.
And perhaps some of them are just cast to the shadows, while the real hero gets the limelight, which is a shame. But here we are, and that's why we're here, to give you an insight into these heroes and villains.
Indeed.
Ding dang delight. But if you want to get involved in any of those episodes, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at On The Topic Pod. And we've got Gmail, which is On The Topic Podcast at gmail.com. And if you follow any of our socials, you can get involved, be a part of the show like Claire. You can leave us a voice message through the link to Anchor. Just click that link and it will take you through. Accept yes to use your microphone on your device, and get involved. And of course, we've got WordPress, Alex.
We do, yeah, our website. So head on over to all lowercase, all one word, On The Topic Podcast.wordpress.com. On there, you'll find our ugly mugs, our bios, our details on how to sign up to our newsletter, links to our partner-affiliated site, Morbid and Mundane, and lots more. And actually, if you haven't got a preferred podcast player, you can stream and listen to all of our back catalogue from the website direct. So go give it a look, give it a listen, and enjoy your way around our website.
Yeah, indeed. But that wraps up for this week. We'll see you in 2022. I'm off to just try and get into the limelight and show that, I was maybe the real hero of the story. I'm Dan.
And, I am going to be explaining to people that perhaps I'm not as bad as everyone thinks, and I'm just misunderstood, and it really wasn't my fault. I'm Alex.
And we'll see you next time. It's potatoes.
Filthy little hobbit.